So with that, I will get underway with my presentation. I definitely encourage you to submit questions via the chat here in Zoom as we go, or through the Q&A feature. Try and keep an eye on that as we go. And I'd say don't feel restricted to just logging questions either. We'd love to just hear as we go, hey, we're using that and it's working great, or hey, I'd be interested in follow-up on that. So we'll do our best to answer throughout the day. But like I said, don't feel it has to be submitted in the form of questions. It's not Jeopardy. So before going into a lot of the detail about what we've been up to this last year, I wanted to give people a quick overview, because looking at the poll, we've got I don't know, maybe about a quarter of people who aren't currently using LabKey products, and get a little calibration, because I'll be highlighting as we go enhancements and what editions of the server they will show up in, so people can have some idea of, do we have access to this already, or what would I need to get to be able to use something. So our community edition is open source and free for everyone to grab and download and use. It's where we started, some 15, 18 years ago. And we're always trying to build out new things, increase performance, make that a great and compelling way to start out. And then moving up into what we call our premium editions. These are the paid subscriptions, where you get additional functionality and you get support and training. And then we start supporting developers at the professional tier. And then the enterprise, of course, is potentially a much bigger deployment across an entire organization. But we're kind of layering on new features. Really, Starter is a great place for people who want to start automating a lot of things they might do in the community edition. Professional, as a general tier, adds more integrations with third-party tools or services. And we also support developers. So if you're really building out functionality, you'll hear more about that in particular in the last presentation of today's agenda. That's great. And then a lot of the compliance and kind of multi-group, multi-site installation support kind of gets added at the enterprise level. And of course, LabKey server itself is just one part of the full LabKey product suite. And this kind of gives a sense of, a growth path. And really, this is a scenario where we think a lot of people new to LabKey might kind of move up this sequence, starting with Sample Manager, what we talked about primarily in day one, and you heard from Hannah and customers on what's involved there, but really focused on sample and freezer management, layering on assay support and ELN at the professional level, and then growing into a LIMS offering. So Bernie gave a great overview and update on the biologics LIMS, starting to integrate with more external systems. And then the LabKey server, SDMS, Scientific Data Management System, is doing things like study management, a lot more customization options, a lot more full-fledged assays built in that really kind of help support very specific use cases there. Of course, different people have come in at different times, and sometimes they'll start with LabKey server and then say, hey, the sample manager thing is showing up and it's part of my premium edition and I want to start using it. So it's not a strict left to right progression, but generally we're adding more and more capabilities as we go across that horizontal thread. So speaking to that, we've really been working hard at connecting with Sample Manager and biologics within LabKey server, so that it's easier to get back and forth if you're using some combination of those capabilities, and making it so that it's easy to layer that on top whenever you're ready. It might be, hey, we're starting with just sample management. Now we want to do full clinical study management. And so, okay, go from Sample Manager to including LabKey server. And this is driving many of the improvements that people see in LabKey Server, whether you're at the community edition or any of the premium editions. We've been doing more and more to make it easier to link data with the study. So that's assay data or sample data, and then automatically feed in and connect with participants and time points. Things like text choice. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but a simple way to add a list of allowable values. We've been doing more with some of our advanced assays like Panorama that I highlighted very briefly on that previous slide, one of those assays in the server SDMS category, connecting mass spectrometry data coming from Skyline and sample data and being able to query and integrate both ways. And then, of course, Sample Manager and Biologics introduced Electronic Lab Notebook. And so now that's coming in through LabKey Server premium editions as well that include that Sample Manager Professional tier. A lot of what we hear from people is they want to connect with other external tools, and that's great because we're doing our best to always make LabKey Server do lots of great and exciting things and do maybe a significant part of your daily workflow, but we're never going to be 100%. And a lot of what people want to be doing, given that it's R&D, is experimenting with new visualizations or reports, kind of prototyping and doing ad hoc analyses. And so we want to keep on connecting with more and more of these sorts of analysis tools. So our biggest push in the last year in this category has been support for Jupyter notebooks. So something that people have asked us about, and we've helped them in the past connect from their Jupyter notebook via LabKey's Python API to be able to query data, maybe push analyze results back into it. But we've gone an additional step now, and like we've been able to do with R for many, many years within LabKey, you can give LabKey your Jupyter notebook, the code and the analysis that it's doing, and then LabKey itself will execute that notebook within Jupyter, show that result with the latest data within LabKey, and users don't need to know anything about Jupyter at all to be able to view that data. And so it's very common that you might have, say, a data analyst, bioinformatician, who creates that Jupyter notebook, but then surfaces it within LabKey with live data using the same LabKey security model and everything else, so that people can view it even if they don't understand anything about Jupyter, or if they always forget, is it a Y or an I, and which vowel gets swapped, just like me. We've been continuing to work and test with RStudio. So this is something we've kind of had this similar approach to what we've just introduced with Jupyter, but making sure we're compatible with new versions of RStudio Workbench, streamlining that process, just making it more efficient. And then another very popular approach that we have for connecting with these other external tools is through kind of a more generic connector, like ODBC, kind of a Microsoft database connection protocol, and JDBC, a Java-based one. And so we've had support for kind of select tools with those connectors for a number of years. And this year we added another category. And so JUMP is a pretty popular tool. We hear, especially people doing biologics and other types of similar research. And that is something that I believe is brand new in 22.7 in the latest hotfix, which I believe just came out this week. So if you're interested in that, please talk to your account manager, and we'd be happy to make sure you get a build that gives you the full compatibility there. S3 is a service from Amazon that is an efficient way to store files. It's generally cheaper than many other approaches. They call it the simple storage service, and I suppose it's simpler than many of their offerings. But it's an area where we continue to invest because Amazon keeps on introducing new options within their simple storage service, new encryption options, new lifecycle management options to be able to have a kind of higher performance, higher price point option, and then have it automatically migrate to kind of more of an archival storage format. And we need to keep updating our APIs to be able to fully support all of those. We, in the maybe 18-month time frame looking back, we've done more and more support for importing different data types into LabKey Server directly from S3. And we've, in the past year, certainly new since the last user conference, done a lot to fully support file watchers within S3. And so these are the ability to watch for newly uploaded files, even if they're not coming through LabKey. If you're just directly mounting your S3 bucket from some other tool, some other script, or drop point, we can notice a new file has shown up, then automatically kick off some sort of sequence of events, maybe moving it to a different location, importing it, running an analysis pipeline, any of the things that you're used to from file watchers running on the local file system storage. Ontology. So if you were here last year, you heard a good bit from Adam Rauch during his presentation about LabKey server updates. And we rolled this out in 21.7, so our July of 2021 release. This gives you the ability to load ontologies. So lots of different organizations publish them, a whole variety of them, a lot of them domain specific. And there are, I like to think of it as two main ways to use ontologies within LabKey server right now. One is to say this field, maybe it's an assay field and it's temperature or weight or drug or dose or something like that. Instead of just having it named weight, you can tag it with an ontology concept, which is more of a much more rigorous definition and helps you align these different data types across different systems. The other way you can do this is to tag a field and really make it a more complicated lookup. So a lookup, of course, is basically just a reference to some other set of values where you're saying, I want to control the vocabulary. But this is a much more powerful way of doing that, so that you can say, oh, I don't want it to just be any old ontology value. I want it to be an antibiotic, or I want it to be a cancer type or a tissue type. So because these ontologies are big trees of data categorized, as you can kind of see here in the small screenshot, it lets you say, I need my value for this medication code. It could just be any drug, or if I chose antibiotic, then aspirin would no longer show on my list because, of course, it's a totally different drug class. So we've been improving the data entry UI. The screenshot down here, in particular, is new. I forget the exact release, but certainly in the last 2 releases. And so we want to keep building that out, and we definitely want to keep hearing about what you want to do with ontologies that you can't right now. One of the biggest kind of internal efforts that we've had in LabKey is to really optimize our LabKey Cloud or software as a service SaaS delivery of LabKey, so that we can upgrade people who are using LabKey Cloud very quickly. We can roll out, we can offer the full suite of capabilities like the Jupyter Notebooks integration that I mentioned at the beginning. And I'd say this year, we've really kind of reached a tipping point that the sizable majority of new customers that we brought on in the past year are choosing LabKey Cloud. So instead of doing an on-premise deployment that their IT group is maintaining and deploying themselves, we are doing all of that management for them, and they just come in, log in, and they've got the latest patched version of LabKey available to them. And I similarly expect in the next 3 to 6 months, we'll kind of tip over, and the majority of customers across all of LabKey will be using LabKey Cloud. One thing that we've done to kind of help accelerate that and make it viable for even more groups is to have the ability to connect to on-premise resources for hybrid systems. So we worked with a longtime collaborator at the University of Wisconsin-Madison they had a large file share that they had invested in and wanted to be able to connect to that. So we worked with their IT group to set up a transit gateway through AWS so that they could use that file system just like they had been doing for their previously on-premise IP server deployment. And now we've taken all of the IT responsibilities over for them for the IP server side, but they still get to use that on-premise resource. So that's great because we understand you're always going to have a mix of tools that you're integrating, and we want to make sure those connections are available. We are continuing to work hard on compliance and validation offerings. So within our high security environment for LabKey Cloud, we continue to support PHI scenarios with full auditing and compliance and additional security scans for that extra sensitivity of that data. And one of the things we've just launched is starting to do validation within LabKey products. So we're starting with Sample Manager, but we are partnering to have kind of a validation package. So if that's something that you are interested in, often for FDA or other regulatory requirements, please let us know. We'd be happy to catch you up on that and think about how it could serve you in the future. And then there's a ton of work that I wanted to highlight that you don't have to do when you are using LabKey Cloud or other SaaS offerings. And I wanted to really give a shout out to our systems engineering team and the engineering team more generally for being able to deliver same-day fixes for critical vulnerabilities that get released in these cases, third-party Java libraries that are ubiquitous across the internet. If you remember, I believe it was in December 2021, there's a series of Log4j CVEs, and we both supplied patches for everyone to deploy on-premise, but we upgraded every single hosted server within LabKey Cloud on that first day. Same for the spraying and Java CVEs. So it's really just kind of gives you that peace of mind that you don't have to worry about these things on your own, or worry, hey, I'm a single person IT department. What if I'm on a vacation when one of these things happens? We've got coverage, and we're happy to make sure that happens. We're also working to reduce false positives in security scanners. So a lot of times groups will run a security scanner, maybe their central IT or security group will launch that. A lot of times we're responding to false positives in those tools, and we're just trying to reduce the noise that we get from those to make it a cleaner set of results for everyone. I think just generally keeping all of our libraries and databases compatible with the latest and greatest. And of course, all of these benefit folks who are on-premise deployments using Community Edition and so forth. I guess this would be a good time for me to end the poll. I think I can share the results. And interesting that we've got most people here currently using LabKey Server. A good chunk of those, maybe half of those, using Sample Manager as well, or maybe instead of or solely at this point. And it seems like this audience, at least, is less in the LabKey Cloud camp at the moment, but they are using other cloud services, and it looks like there's a couple questions. Be happy to get to those in just a minute as I get to the end of the presentation about some more details on the cloud side. And then kind of a little bit of a grab bag, miscellaneous things that we've been up to and are showing up in really most of these, or most of the editions. So almost all of these will be available in Community and Starter Professional and Enterprise. Texturized data fields, I mentioned that briefly at the beginning of the session. This is a simpler way to control the allowable set of values. So I talked about ontologies, which is a very rich way that you can do this, but text choice is something where you can just when you're designing your data type, so your data set or your sample type or your list, you can directly, when you're defining that field, say, here are the 3 values that I want you to accept. You're going to drop down in the user interface when someone uploads. And one of the nicest things is that this will actually update existing values if you rename it. So if you're going from yes to yes, please, it'll change all the values. You don't need to worry about making that kind of update the way that you might if you're using a list or other approach like this. Making the study more flexible, connecting more and more assay and sample data in an automatic way, so you don't have to fill in participant and time point values as part of that operation. Participant level access control and studies. So this tends to be a pretty advanced study approach where maybe different cohorts are supposed to be visible to, say, one site or one group of investigators. Making that possible is making it easier to clean up mistakes or new terminology that you're using within the lab or organization. So you're less locked into the original name, to rename things. Continue to build out LabKey SQL with lots of new functions and capabilities across database types. And I could go on, but I will spare you. But the release notes are the place to check out for all the details for everything we've been up to. Looking forward, we are expecting to do a major push for ETL improvements. ETL is extract, transform, load. It's a way to transfer data between databases. Oftentimes getting data from some other data source into LabKey server, but it could also be LabKey going out. And a lot of what we want to focus on is making it easier to administer and operate day to day, and making it easier to have flexibility for scheduling. Normally this is a nightly job, but just this week I want to run it every hour because I know there's high visibility updates coming through, things like that. Building out more capabilities within study, making data entry easier, and also making it easier to ensure data integrity, so that you're limiting to the known list of participant IDs instead of letting people enter new ones. Of course, sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. So trying to give you more options and capabilities there. Better support for adverse events is a kind of alternative time point type. That's been a kind of long-standing headache sometimes with visit-based studies. Where do you capture those? How do they fit into the full sequence? Looking at rolling out an informed consent service. So this is maybe even a different level of offering than just the SaaS and LabKey cloud capabilities I was talking about a minute ago. It's looking at LabKey running the service for you that's screening and enrolling participants. So effectively, we are the administrators of that server, not just of the infrastructure that it's running on. Building out more ODBC and JDBC access, letting lists be more flexible and be used across different folders. Historically, they've been scoped to just a single folder, all sorts of good things. Again, could go on and on, but please send me or other LabKey folks a note if you are interested in more details there. So with that, get to some of the questions. And it looks like there's actually a couple of people asking similar things about the cloud and SaaS offerings, and specifically around, I think, developing or supporting developers outside of LabKey. So let's say you've got a development team that's doing some module development or iterating on other things, asking about how do we get that into a LabKey cloud instance. So I think we've got a couple of groups that are doing that, where we'll kind of pull resources on maybe a nightly basis from a source control system and refresh, usually going to like a staging or dev or test. Different groups call it different things, but essentially not going directly to production, but then having a way to roll it forward to production. Hannah just sent me a chat message that yes, a good point. SCTX, Seattle Children's, is one of those groups doing that, and actually, happily, Wenjin is presenting. He's our final presenter of the day, so he might be able to give us a little hint of what that looks like in practice for them. So that I think is kind of our main workflow. It's definitely something we see as being important to be able to fully support. And I know different groups have more staging servers than others, and different expectations on when databases get reset based on the latest from production, all sorts of things like that. So I really love the opportunity to kind of dive into this with individual groups, figure out how close we are today, and understand what the gaps are, if there are some.